Our State of the U.S. segment tonight, liberals don't have a real solution to health care, so they've resorted to scare tactics. Their latest is the claim that tens of millions of people with pre-existing conditions will lose their coverage if Obamacare is repealed. But that's just not true. In fact, the changes in the American Health Care Act to pre-existing conditions will likely affect just a very small portion of Americans. With me now to break it down, COO of DTC Perspectives and the host of the upcoming health policy radio show, Debating Health, Scott Ehrlich. Scott, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Liz.
All right, Scott, start with this true or false question here. In my opinion, this narrative is false, but the idea that tens of millions of Americans are going to lose their coverage due to pre-existing conditions if we repeal Obamacare, is that true?
Not only is it not true, I'm not really sure how that number came about because tens of millions of people didn't gain coverage due to ACA. So some of the numbers I've seen make it actually sound like there's somehow, if ACA is repealed or AHCA passes instead, somehow there'll be less people insured than there was before ACA passed. So it just doesn't hold water. No,
it doesn't. And I said this earlier in the week. Sometimes I think Democrats have a little bit of difficulty doing basic math. This might be an example of it. But talk to me about this. First of all, let's talk about your personal perspective, if you don't mind. I mean, you have a pretty interesting story. You have a pre-existing condition. What happened to you under Obamacare?
Well, nothing really, because I happen to be insured under my wife's plan. Pre-ACA, I was diagnosed. I've had social anxiety disorder for 20 minutes, although I'm on TV right now, so I don't know. But I was diagnosed, and I actually applied for self-insurance. This was 2008, 2009, and I was denied by the first carrier, despite the fact that my insurance was, or not my insurance, my drug was a generic drug, cost something like $20 a month. I would have happily signed a rider saying, you don't have to cover this or anything out of that.
Right.
But was picked up by the second insurer. So I do like to tell people, just because someone is denied or can be denied for pre-existing conditions doesn't mean they will be denied by every insurer. Since then, I've actually acquired diabetes, so I do assume that I would be a difficult self-insurer if I come to that. I'm insured through my wife's group rate, so it hasn't been an issue. But if I do decide to self-insure, if she gets a new job or something happens, I can see that being difficult.
Right. Do a little comparison, though. So you wrote this article on the Federalist. It was a great article, by the way. I encourage all my viewers to go read it. It's about pre-existing conditions, but you said that you compared the price to your self-insurance or to your insurance before Obamacare versus what that same plan would cost under Obamacare with your pre-existing conditions. Talk to me about that.
You know, I can't do apples to apples because I don't remember all the details of my pre-existing of my plan. But if I recall, it was a catastrophic plan, and I think it had a $5,000 deductible. 100% copay. And when I looked at what a similar plan would cost nationwide, I can't remember the website I used. I meant to leave it up, but I don't have it in front of me right now. I looked at the average Obamacare plan, and that would be the equivalent of a silver plan, which I want to say averages around $380 nationwide without subsidies. So the price of my policy would have doubled, and that was the doubling with including my pre-existing condition in there at the time.
Right, which I think is important. I mean, we hear a lot of anecdotes that illustrate the opposite point of view. We don't hear a lot of personal anecdotes that illustrate this point of view. I think it's important to point that out. But talk to me, too, about, so when Obamacare was passed, there was this program that was also implemented called the Pre-Existing Condition Insurance Plan. And it was supposed to be a bridge for people before Obamacare was fully implemented from their old plans or from zero plans before Obamacare started covering them. Talk to me about that.
Basically, as I understand PCIP, and I don't know a heck of a lot about it other than it was written in my article, because as much as they spent on marketing Obamacare and exchanges and this stuff, didn't really push it that hard. They only had a very limited amount of money for it, so I don't know if that was something to do with it, but I do know that they came in under the amount of enrollments they expected, and I think they still went over budget with it. But PCIP was designed to basically, like you said, be a bridge plan, be a high-risk pool akin to what the AHCA is trying to set up. I believe 115,000 people at peak nationwide signed up for this plan.
Right.
So if there's really 24 million people with pre-existing conditions out there, they weren't seeking this out.
Right, and that was kind of my point by asking the question. I mean, Democrats right now are saying that tens of millions of people with pre-existing conditions aren't going to be able to get coverage, but when Obamacare implemented this high-risk pool, this program where people with pre-existing conditions could then get coverage, just over 100,000 people signed up for it. 100,000 nationwide.
Peak.
At the peak. I mean, that.
I think by the time it ended, I think there were around 96,000, I want to say.
Right. That does not match up. Tens of millions versus 100,000 does not match up. So then let's move on to the next thing. So that's a logical disparity, which I think liberals need to answer for. But the Kaiser Family Foundation, they did a study that said that 27% of people in our country were uninsurable due to pre-existing conditions. Again, 27%. I mean, that is tens of millions of people.
Well, I thought it was funny because they said 27% of people were uninsurable due to pre-existing conditions. Yet there were far less people on that were uninsured prior to Obamacare. So if you're telling me 27% of people, which would be around 75 million people, yet I think even the highest number you heard bandied about around Obamacare was about 54 million people uninsured, it doesn't really hold water. Now I understand that their point is probably, well, if everyone was to be on individual plans and everyone who could have had pre-existing conditions was denied, then but it's not a realistic thing. It wasn't realistic pre-Obamacare. It's not realistic under Obamacare. It's not realistic under the AHCA because most people don't get insurance on the exchanges. You have
Right.
people, you have something like 60 some odd million people get it through Medicare. I think 55 million or so get it through Medicaid, another 7 million or so through TRICARE. So that's 125 million. That's about 40% of the country right there. Another 50% or so get it through work. And again, don't forget, when Obamacare was passed, you were at the height of the recession. I mean, unemployment was at a height. So you're going to have the number of people that were getting insurance through work probably near a low point, simply because so many people were laid off around that time. So you were dealing with an unrealistically high percentage of Americans that had probably gotten insurance through work that weren't getting it through an employer plan at that moment.
Right. In the conclusion of your article, you propose, I guess, the idea that it would really just be 0.5% of the adult U.S. population that would be, facing, not even denied health coverage, but facing potential issues. How'd you get to that number?
Well, let's be clear. The number comes from, I actually looked at a study. It was a company called Avalier. They spend a lot more money, have a lot more time on something like this. I'm a guy sitting in his house Googling some stuff that just happened to be
Right.
stuff. But they come up with a number around 2.6 million. I came up with my number a different way. They took, I think, actual data, I want to say from CMS or somewhere, totaling up the amount of people that were on exchanges with pre-existing conditions. I kind of applied a formula and looked at people self-insuring and kind of did that. But either way you do the numbers, they come out similar because Avalier's number pertained to everyone in the United States. Whereas I looked at it and said, even under AHCA, if you have a Democratic governor, you're not going to request a waiver at AHCA.
Right, right.
There are 6 states in the country that have laws forbidding excluding people with pre-existing conditions: New Jersey, Maine, I want to say Massachusetts, a few others. So if you're in one of those states, even with a waiver, they can't get rid of pre-existing conditions. So any state that had a Democratic governor, one house of the legislature was controlled by Democrats, I assumed, they're not going to want to apply for a waiver. They really don't apply here. So you're only left with 25 states that had Republican governors, Republican houses in the state legislature that I saw as potentially there to opt out. Come 2018, and again, this won't apply, I think, to 2018, 2019. Republicans that are somewhat high water points, so I wouldn't be surprised if it's even less than this
Right.
come that point. But when you total all those people up, you're a little over 1 million in those states. And again, that's assuming they opt out of a waiver, completely eliminates pre-existing conditions. They don't leave any protections in because a waiver, I don't believe, means you have to eliminate all pre-existing conditions and essential health benefits. You could opt out.
No, it's not at all. It just means that if you get the waiver, it just means that you're allowed, I guess, to jack up the rates a little bit. Totally different. Scott, that's really, really interesting. I appreciate you sharing this. And like I said to our viewers, go to the Federalist, read his article. It actually uses math. It actually uses logic. It actually uses fact, unlike the Democrats. All right, Scott,
I had
thanks
an
for being
article
here.
that actually came out today that actually broke down not only the number, but was kind of the second part of the article that talked about what each of those people would cost us and how long the high-risk pools could last versus what the community rating of Obamacare did to everyone else's insurance rates. So it's staggering how much, no matter what plan you do, people that are already sick will cost.
Right, because that of course, is the other Democratic argument that it wasn't enough money. We'll have to talk about that another day. Scott, like I said, thanks for being here. I appreciate it.